Welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to this Wednesday early edition of Mrs. Are Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast, joined today by Cole and EJ. And this is the first time the two of you have met, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, EJ, how have you been the last week?
I've been good. I'm hanging in there. Pretty good week for me, so I'm doing pretty well.
Cool. Cole, good to see you again. I think it's been a few weeks.
It has. It's been a little busy, but I'm here, ready to go. So,
yeah. So EJ threw an idea at me a week or so ago, said, hey, let's do Fangio defensive fits, like players that fit a Fangio defensive scheme. And I know that that's the kind of thing that just gets Cole like riled up. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. But EJ, do you want to maybe explain the Fangio defense a little bit for everybody? And then we'll just kind of kick it off that way.
Yeah, so basically with all these defensive schemes that's out there in the NFL, they all have their own characteristics and they all have their own ideology of what they want to accomplish on the field. So in order to do that, they need specific type of players that fit what they want to do. What we have in Fangio, the main ideology is to limit big plays. So that's why he offers the too high safety structure in coverage, and he wants bigger bodies up front in order to clog up the middle, push everything to the outside and let your athletes come down and make the tackles. So basically how it's structured is you have your nose tackle, or to call it a zero technique. He lines up, head up, right on the center. His job isn't necessarily to rush the passer, but his job is to take up space, take on blockers, and allow for the defenders around him to go make plays. So for that, you need, a bigger player. You need a stronger player. The two defensive ends are not your traditional defensive ends when you think of a regular 43 defense. Defensive ends are usually defensive tackles in size, and they line up in a 4-eye technique, which is the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. Their job, push the pocket and hold the point of attack. So you need stronger guys there as well. Now, they still can rush the passer, but their main job first is stop the run, clog the middle. They can still get to the quarterback if they want to, if the play calls for it, but they need to clog up that middle. Your two edge rushers are more like your defensive ends. They are smaller in stature compared to compared to 4-down linemen defensive ends. They usually stand up in a 2-point stance, and they're rushing from the outside. Those are your pass rushers of this formation. Now, usually they call us a 3-4 front. They call it a 5-2. Either way you look at it, you got 7 in the box. Now, 7 men in the box, including your 2 stacked linebackers, that's behind the line of scrimmage. 7 in the box is considered a light box. So usually what teams do is they'll bring a safety down in order to stop the run. That puts 8 in the box. And that means you're a heavy box. Fangio wants to live in a light box and not sacrifice coverage on the back end because he doesn't want the ball thrown over his head. So that's why you have to compensate. If you got less bodies in the box, you need bigger bodies. You need stronger bodies. So the whole ideology of Fangio's system is live with a light box and play 2 high safeties on the back end. As far as coverage wise, the other reason for playing 2 high safeties is you can morph that coverage into whatever you want it to be after the snap. You want your quarterback, you want the opposing quarterback to make all his adjustments and all his thinking after the ball has been snapped while he's under pressure. So if you're showing and that's where the phrase comes from, a 2 high shell. That means before the ball is snapped, you're showing 2 safeties in the back. After the ball is snapped, you can rotate into a cover 1 or cover 3. One of those safeties can easily come down because Fangio's whole thing is players play faster when they're going forward. So he wants everybody going forward and attacking downhill instead of retreating backwards and going with the receivers there. So that's the whole point of what Fangio does. It's not similar to a lot of what people do. And the thing is, with this scheme, it was brought back in vogue. It's always been around. I mean, even going back to Dom Capers, back when the Panthers were an expansion team, Dom Capers had pretty much as the grandfather of all this. Vic Fangio just moved it forward and added his own tweaks to it. So with this scheme, it came back in vogue in order to stop these spread offenses in college. That's and then it's made its way to the NFL, and now we see the more 2 high safeties and light boxes and everything like that. We see that more come to fruition. So basically, on the back end, as far as coverage goes, you want your safeties to be able to come downhill and have a presence in the run game. You want to, if you're coming out of a 2 high shell, if you're going to stay in your 2 high shell, you're doing your cover 2, your cover 4, cover 6, your cover 8, and you can spin that however you want to, or you can spin it how you want to. And if you want to drop down into a single coverage, have one of your safeties be a robber, and then you can run your cover 1s, your cover 3s. So that's pretty much how he does. Another trait with Fangio defense is he does not blitz a ton. That's not one of what he likes to do. What he does like to do is he likes to run simulated pressure. What simulated pressure is when you have a whole bunch of guys at the line of scrimmage. 3 of them are coming. You don't know which one is the 4th rusher that's coming. You're still rushing 4, but you don't know which 4 are coming. That's why you'll see a defensive lineman drop back, and you'll see a linebacker rushing from the second level. It looks like a blitz. It has the effectiveness of a blitz because you're still sending a player that's not accounted for in a protection scheme. So it has all the benefits of a blitz, but you're not sacrificing a player in coverage. So that's what he likes to do in order to get his pressure. So basically, that's what the defense. That's in the basic terms. That's what the defensive scheme is, and you just need specific players that are able to operate in that type of scheme.
Cole, do you have anything that you'd add about the Fangio defense?
I mean, not really. Vic Fangio is kind of like the only coach that has really been able to use that defense. He really liked that 2 high look where he was in quarters back when he was in the AFC West with the Broncos. It really stumped Patrick Mahomes, especially when he'd rotate down like EJ had mentioned, and not even necessarily into that cover 3 look. Sometimes he'd get really weird and throw some exotic like cover 6 or 9 out there with it. So he loves those mind games, and that's where the sort of players that you need, especially in the secondary, come into play. I mean, you look at Ajero Evero, who's a Fangio disciple, can't really replicate what's going on on that front seven, and that might be a talent deficiency problem. But overall, Vic's the only person that really has his defense down the way he does to be able to have a number one overall defense in the league.
Yep, yeah, and that's the thing. Like Jonathan Gannon over in Arizona, he tries to do it, and Brandon Staley, he tries it. It works to an extent, but nobody really does it like Vic does it.
So this is interesting, right? So like when we put the podcast together, so the audience knows, EJ had the idea and EJ was working on it. And then I asked Cole maybe a couple of days later. Their list came together about an hour before we went live. So they have seen each other's lists. One of the funny things is I believe 4 of the guys that you picked were the same. So
I think it's actually 5. I look back. We have another player that we didn't mention.
Yeah. So Will Johnson is the first player that you both picked. So what about Will Johnson, EJ, makes him a good fit for a Fangio defense?
So basically, as far as the coverage schemes go, if you're going to be playing it too high, if you're going to be playing a cover 4, you're not going to be a pressed man. You're not going to be pressed up in his face. It's because basically with Fangio cover schemes, he plays off man or basically you're in zone. He doesn't press a ton. So you look at Will Johnson, he does some of that same stuff at Michigan, and his read and react and his trigger downhill is part of what makes him special. So he already has those traits that Fangio requires from his cornerbacks. That's why I put him on there. He's a guy that he has awareness in zone coverage. I mean, you can see, I forget what game it was, but he can read route patterns right in front of him, and he jumps the route and he's taking it to the house for 6. You've seen that. You can see that. I mean, you pull up any of his highlights and you can see that. But on the film, you see that he does that numerous times, and he has the physical abilities to match the eyes and the instincts that the physical ability to match the eyes and the instincts that he already has. So that's why I put Will Johnson on there, because I think he would be an excellent fit if you want to play your cover 4, you want to play your cover 6 and all that. I think he's an excellent fit for that.
Yeah. So Cole, do you have anything to add on Will Johnson?
Not really. Other than the fact that Vic isn't really an RAS guy. He's not going to look, especially in his DB room, not going to see a lot of guys that are like blowing up the combine and are on Sports Center all the time for absolute freak athletic plays, especially in that DB room. Most of the athletes tend to be towards that front 7, especially in the defensive end area. Mm-hmm. So that's why Will Johnson and the next guy, I believe me and EJ have different people, but for the second corner, you're going to kind of see a theme with that, especially for the defensive backs.
Okay, so one of the other players you had in common was Jahdae Barron. So Cole, what do you like about Jahdae Barron in a Fangio scheme?
Yeah, so he has the versatility to play outside. I prefer him in the nickel. I think he can be an all-pro level nickel. But specifically when you look at how Vic Fangio's basically base set of DBs that are out there, it's almost always a nickel set. They normally aren't rolling out there with 3 linebackers, Mike, Will, Sam. It's kind of most of the time nickel, Sam, Mike, and the outside linebackers rushing off the edge. Sam or Will. It depends on the strength of the formation. But when you see Jahdae Barron, that's a smart guy, and to be in the Vic Fangio defense, you have to be smart, especially at nickel when you're getting all types of different coverage looks, types of coverage tendencies where you have to be able to check out on zone, or you kind of have to have good hip fluidity and good feet there. Jahdae Barron had mentioned in an interview, I believe, with Brett Coleman about how he doesn't use the traditional T-step, which is interesting because he uses, I believe, a V-step. I think that's what it's called. I'm not 100% on my DB terminology as much as I am with the trenches, but that's something that kind of shows up a little bit with what Cooper DeJean did at Iowa as well. And he's not necessarily the most superb athlete, like I had mentioned earlier, but he's a guy with a really smart football mind and a guy that knows how to play the position, especially in the nickel, really well.
Okay, and EJ, what do you like about Jahdae Barron that he made your list too?
Yeah, same as what Cole was saying. It's his smarts. You have like playing that nickel position. You got to be smart and you got to be tough because one thing you do have runs fit responsibilities as well, and you have to be able to communicate with your safeties and pass off. And that's another thing with something that Fangio does. He does it's called a match carry deliver system. Is where you have to when you're matching routes. You have to carry a certain wide receiver throughout his route, and then you have to hand him off to somebody else. Now, that requires communication. You have to be on the same page with the rest of your defensive backs, and you have to be able to see that. And Jahdae Barron, he displays that type of mental acumen on the field where he can hand off routes. He knows what's coming, and he can pick up the next route that's coming into whatever zone that he's covering. So I think he has the smarts. I think he has the toughness that would make him an excellent nickel defender.
Cool. And then another player you had in common, EJ, was safety Jalen Reed from Penn State. So what do you like about Jalen Reed within a Fangio scheme?
Same thing as Jahdae Barron, smart. He communicates well. If you look at Penn State versus West Virginia, I mean, early in the game, you can see Jalen Reed directing traffic. Hey, you go there. And then when the ball is snapped, he's racing over the top of the defense and breaking up a pass. He's a smart player. He knows what he's seeing, and he knows what to do about it. And he has the physical traits to carry out all the coverage assignments as well. So I think he's a player that, and another thing about with the safeties, you want them to be able to mirror their attributes because motion can change the responsibilities of what the defensive back is doing on that specific play. So Jalen Reed is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. So that way, if motion happens and his job is changed to something, he can adapt and he can adapt on the fly and still be able to make the play.
Cole, anything that you'd add for Jalen Reed?
EJ kind of got most of it, but like again, what he had mentioned about at the very start with those rolling safeties, rotating post snap. Jalen Reed is somebody I would not be necessarily the most comfortable with playing in a true free safety coverage role. Like that's your guy in your deep zones. He's not necessarily the best long speed, and even horizontal, he doesn't have the best speed. It's average, I believe. When he goes into the league, it'll be about league average, but you kind of look at what they had with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year and in 2022 and 3, I believe. It's a guy that he was the rotating player that was like not necessarily in the box, but he has more run fit responsibilities than their free safety, who I believe was Reed Blankenship the past 2 or 3 years. That's kind of the role I envision Jalen Reed being in, regardless of what defense he's in, because that's kind of where he fits the best, and that's where he can carve out the best role. But if you get him in with that Vic Fangio scheme, man, you're talking about a high-end starter for a while with Jalen Reed because of what he offers physically as a run defender, but also it hides the limitations of his vertical speed and athleticism.
Well, and then next player that you guys both have in common was Walter Nolan. And I'm going to preface this, and hopefully you remembered what EJ said earlier, because Walter Nolan, most of us would call a defensive tackle, but in a Fangio scheme, you guys both had him as a defensive end and not on the nose. So talk about Walter Nolan and how he would fit into a Fangio scheme, Cole.
So it's honestly not necessarily a splitting image, but you kind of look at what Jalen Carter, you look at his size and the burst he has athletically. I wouldn't say Walter Nolan's necessarily the best or the same tier as athlete as Jalen Carter or even the same prospect, but almost a similar story with like how their pre or post draft processes have gone. So that's another thing that's very eerily similar to Carter as well. But you see the hand usage and the violent hands, and that's somebody that I'm totally okay with playing in a tight front, which is Fangio staple with that zero tech 4-eye. Sometimes that zero tech's bouncing out to him, but I mean, other than that, it's normally just your 4 eyes that you're hoping from the interior are the ones generating pressure, and then you have your edges coming out, looping or crashing. And Walter Nolan's the perfect fit to go be a looper or a crasher. He's somebody that I can see totally working out. Maybe you have somebody stunning into the B gap, and you want Walter Nolan coming out. He's athletic enough to do that. He has violent hands to swipe move away tackles and guards. He's a dude that Fangio would know what to do with him, regardless if he was going to use him at defensive end or if he was going to have him play like some games over, if you wanted him to have some exotic looks over at nose tackle or defensive tackle in those sets as well.
So EJ, how about you? What about Walter Nolan made you add him to your best defensive fit list?
Yeah, because I like the fact of him getting pressure from a 4-eye formation. That's the thing with if your nose tackle is doing what he's supposed to do, he's going to be taking on the bulk of the double teams, and that means you leaving Walter Nolan alone with the guard. I like it. I like his chances there. He has the strength. He has the hand usage, so he can get penetration from that 4-eye position. I think he's just an excellent fit. Like the Jalen Carter similarities are there. You see it with a little bit his explosiveness and his upfield get off. But you want him in a situation where he doesn't have to read and react. I want him to attack more. So having him in that 4-eye as opposed to inside as a nose, he's allowed to attack more. So that's where I want him at.
Okay, and then EJ, the last player you had in common was Carson Schlesinger from UCLA. So what did you like about Schlesinger that you had him as one of the linebackers for Fangio?
With Fangio's scheme, your defensive linemen are keeping the offensive linemen from climbing to the second level. And that's where I didn't like Carson Schlesinger. I didn't like him taking on blocks from offensive linemen. I want to keep him clean. I want him to flow. I want him see ball, get ball. I want him just attacking downhill. In a Fangio scheme where you got the big bodies up front, he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to attack gaps, shoot gaps, and just flow with the football, use his athleticism, use what makes him special. And he's allowed to do that in a Fangio scheme, whereas maybe in a different scheme, he may have to take on a offensive lineman that's climbing to the second level, and then he'll get swallowed up. But here, I want to keep him free. With both my linebackers, I want to keep them free, and I want them attacking gaps downhill.
Cool. And Cole, how about you on Carson Schlesinger?
Yeah, 1 year production there at UCLA, but what you saw on tape was a downhill tackle for loss machine. If he went even, like somebody got one hand on him most of the time, if he's going downhill with that momentum, he's not being stopped and he's going to be able to make a tackle in the backfield. And with that said, that's another dude that, like EJ mentioned with the simulated pressures, where they might get cute and drop a defensive end back there and have the linebacker be the fourth guy coming to get pressure. And that's something that I feel like Carson Schlesinger can do in a role like that, and limit some of the problems with getting hands on the defense or getting his hands kind of removed and getting taken out of the play by offensive linemen. So if he's coming in on stunts, which is not necessarily like a Fangio staple, but coming in and getting that simulated pressure is something that Schlesinger can come in and do day one. I mean, if you look at it, they had Orlin Burks out there for majority of the playoffs, and they won the Super Bowl. So it's not like being a linebacker in the Fangio scheme is the hardest to do role wise. Obviously, instinctually and knowing what to do to command the defense, especially on Mike, it's a different story. But Schlesinger is the type of dude that they can kind of get in there and have him be a 85 to 90 tackle player his rookie year, even in a minimal role.
Okay. So Cole, so at this point we've covered, I believe that was 5 guys that the two of you identified. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to talk about the 6 guys that you each have different. So Cole, pick one of your Fangio scheme fits. And I have a feeling I know where you're going first, but this one's going to be up to you.
No, I'm going to save that one for last because I know who you're referencing. I'm going to go with Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. I have him at nose tackle. That's a dude who's bigger. I believe he's 230 pounds, if not a little bit more. Stocky, I think he's 6'1". But he's a dude that you can have him take the brink of the force on combo blocks. He's a dude that in the run game, you're not really worried about being displaced because he plays with a low center of gravity. And for a bigger dude, he has relatively strong core strength, which was impressive when I was watching him. And another thing is he offers a little bit of juice at the pass rushing spot. So, like, maybe Jordan Davis is tired, you sub him in, and he somehow happens to be a passing down, and he's a dude that might be able to generate some pressure for you. Not saying he's going to be a dude that's going to win every single snap or have one-on-one set up for him, but he's the dude that can naturally crash the pocket if it was so needed to happen for him. And that's kind of why I favored Jamari Caldwell at nose tackle to that Fangio scheme.
And EJ, who's the first player you want to highlight?
I'll piggyback right off of Cole. I'll go with a nose tackle. I was debating between three players. I was debating between Jamari Caldwell, Tyleik Williams, and Derek Harmon as a nose tackle. So I settled on Derek Harmon as a nose, just because I like his play strength. He's hard to move in the run game. I want somebody that's going to be there and take up space and take on blockers and still offer a little bit of pass rush, and somebody that can disengage and attack the ball carrier. So I favored that strength in the middle of the defense. All of those players pretty much can do the same thing. So it's pretty much just pick your flavor.
And who's the next player you want to highlight?
I guess we'll stay on the defensive line. And I had as my other defensive end opposite Walter Nolan, I had TJ Sanders. Now, he isn't the biggest guy. I think he's like around weighed in at like 6'3", 290. But he's a guy that can get penetration straight up the middle. I liken him to pretty much a guy that just got paid, Milton Williams. He's around the same size as well. He's around the 6'3", 290 range, and he functioned very well playing in Fangio's scheme. TJ Sanders is a guy with good hand usage. He has strength at the point of attack. He can disengage and attack the ball carrier, and he has some pass rush juice. And that's the thing with these defensive ends. If you want to go into, say it's 3rd and 10, you're going into a nickel package. These defensive ends are now your 2-3 techniques at defensive tackle, and now you're telling them to go get after the passer. Now you're telling them to shoot gaps on 3rd down because it's a passing situation. So you want guys with the versatility to be able to hold the point of attack on neutral downs where it's an option of running, and you want them to be able to pin their ears back and attack when on 3rd down when it's time to get after the quarterback. And I think both of these guys can do it.
Cool. And Cole, who's your next player that you'd like to highlight?
This one's a little boring. It's another corner. Zy Alexander out of LSU. Somebody that I had mentioned, not necessarily the greatest long speed athlete, but a dude that kind of was playing a lot of that off coverage, whether it was off man, off zone, but a guy that, whether it was cover 3 or cover 4, he's able to drop back and kind of flip his hips and turn, which is something that I think the Eagles desperately need because I don't know. EJ's an Eagles fan, so I don't know how necessarily you feel about having Keely Ringo or Eli Ricks out there as your corner too. I would have preferred to have kept Isaiah Rodgers, but with that said, you have a guy like Zy Alexander who I trust in coverage to be sticky enough to maybe in 2 or 3 years develop into a solid starting corner too. Overall, it's kind of boring and similar to what we said about Will Johnson. Not necessarily has to be the best athlete. He just has to be good enough in coverage to stay alive out there and be okay enough in the run game to come back and tackle anybody. Like wide zone, your corners are going to be attacked there. So you got to have somebody that can at least make a tackle. And Zy Alexander can do that for you.
Cool. And then, Cole, do you want to talk about one more of your guys?
Yeah, let's go with a little bit more of a fun one. I'm actually going to kind of punk out of who I said on my list, but back to defensive line. For defensive end, I originally said Jordan Birch because I didn't want to take TJ Sanders because I don't want to have too many similar players. But when I was watching Jordan Birch back, I was watching Mateo Uyunglele today, and I was kind of like, I'm not sure. So I'm actually going to flip that and go to somebody that I know plays a 4-eye and plays it well, and that's Shamar Stewart. Doubt he falls there, but you're getting a freak athlete, which is something that the defensive line needs in that Fangio scheme. You're getting somebody that can hold strong and be a contained man, let alone a guy that can loop and crash. So at the minimum, you're getting a dude that's a very, very good run defender and somebody that offers ceiling as a stunner and crasher for you on loop blitzes and stuff like that. So you're also like, and you're getting somebody that can also drop back into coverage on those simulated pressures. So overall, you're getting a very well-rounded player with a super, super high pass rushing ceiling, assuming he gets coached up enough to reach that potential. And then you're looking at a top 10 type of dude for that scheme, which is just kind of terrifying, if you ask me, with Jalen Carter and Shamar Stewart at defensive end out. Yeah.
I'll take that all day.
Yeah. So EJ, you want to highlight a couple more of your guys?
Yeah. I at cornerback, I got my other cornerback. It was Maxwell Hairston. I think he's another guy. When you watch him against Kentucky, he plays in a lot of zone, plays in a lot of off man. I don't think he doesn't have elite size. He's like only 5'11", like 180 something. But he has ball skills. He has good eyes in zone. And he has quick feet. He has a very quick trigger downfield, and he has the ball skills in order to make a difference making play. So I think he can. He's a guy that you can put in the cover 4, cover 3s. When the action is kept in front of him and he can react to it, that's when you see him at his best. If you want to press him, that's when the size and length limitations will come out. But as long as you're keeping everything in front of him, I think he can survive in those type of schemes. And back at I did both of my 4 eyes. And another thing on Shamar Stewart, I had him as my 4 eye, I think, but I was like, no, that's too easy. He would be too much. And the thing is, like, people, they kill him for lack of production. But I'm like, yo, y'all got to realize he's playing a 4 eye. His job is just to throw people around. They're not asking him to get after the quarterback. On the times they did ask him to get after the quarterback, he's working some tackles out. He's got a little bit of a 2-hand swipe. He's got some bend. I think like the whole production argument with Shamar Stewart, I think that is way overblown. I would be perfectly fine with him just being a 4 eye. I don't need him to be you don't have to be a 12 sack pass rusher coming off the edge. I'm perfectly fine with him just being a 4 eye. But that's just my go ahead.
So EJ, did you see Cole's write-up of Shamar Stewart on Twitter?
No, I didn't.
22,000 people saw it.
Oh, wow.
So you need, like, what you just said is what Cole posted on Twitter.
That was my exact argument. I was going after I'm an analytically minded type of person. I like using it for context with film. I was going after the geeks that they pass rush win rates basically the end all be all. And I was like, man, he's playing a 4 eye most of the time, and when he's in a 5-techer out 70 to 80% of the time, he's in a contain role anyway, so he's not supposed to do anything. Yeah. And he's just too athletic to not do anything, so he's going to make splash plays every now and again. Mm-hmm. So there was a whole tangent with that. I was a little bit fed up with people for the past 2 weeks about Shamar Stewart.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Texas A&M. They want you to play the run first and foremost, and then get after the quarterback. So you see him manhandling an offensive tackle, then watching and looking to see if it's going to be a run. Then he's tossing the offensive tackle aside and then chasing down the quarterback. And by that time, the quarterback done threw the ball away. So you just gotta. This is why I wanted to do scheme fits, because once you know what his job is, then you know how to accurately assess what he's good at and what he's not good at. He's like the perfect poster child for this exercise right here.
Exactly.
Oh, and I lied. It's now 31,000 people. So I'm tagging you in it now. But anyway, that was right on cue that you had Shamar Stewart. I also found it very interesting that a lot of the guys that you like that fit are going to be drafted in round 1 before Philadelphia is on the clock.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I try to stay away from it, but it gets hard in this draft, especially towards that round 3 area. It's like, ooh, I I don't know. Maybe you're talking offense for them towards the back end of day 2 and like day 3 area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So EJ, is there another player on your list that you'd like to talk about?
I got another the other safety. I got Kevin Winston Jr. Now he's a bit out of sight, out of mind because he had a torn ACL early in the season. He hasn't been able to work out or anything like that. But when you put on the tape of him, you go to 2023 tape and you look at early the first 2 games of this season, you see a guy that plays very well downhill, has no problem with with run fit responsibilities, and he's a guy that can mirror responsibilities with the other safety. If you need him to, if you want him to drop down and be the robber, he can do that. If you need him playing on the roof of the defense, he can do that. He's a guy that he's not. I don't think he's going to be like your supreme ball hawk type of guy, but he can do his job and he can cover. He can work in the coverage system, like the cover 6s, the cover 4s, the cover 3s, whatever coverage you want to run. He can run with that. So I got Kevin Winston there as my other safety.
Okay. Cole, is there another Fangio defensive scheme fit that you want to talk about?
Yep, I'll finish my last 2 players. I'm going to start off with safety again, my other safety, Malachi Starks, who actually, while being probably a first-round player and a dude that's top 10 on my board, I'm pretty sure Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah have both said that it's very possible he goes later in round 1. So it's entirely possible for the Eagles to take him. I'm going to Malachi Starks here. And he's a dude, when you look at who Vic Fangio had in Denver, that's where I stemmed back to kind of looking in for this research for this podcast episode. When he was in Denver, he had Justin Simmons, a dude that got after the football, was a good athlete, and overall did his job and was smart, but was also flexible. He could there was times where you could probably throw him out a corner for a play if you needed to. Like in the red zone, you kind of like – you want to get like weird and throw some weird exotic coverage out there. Malachi Starks is that type of dude that can do that. And I think that's a perfect fit. Like it doesn't get much better than that. If you're the Eagles sitting in the back end of day 1 and you walk away with Malachi Starks, because then you have Vic Fangio probably smiling for the first time ever in the war room because he just got his new Justin Simmons and his new shiny toy. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So do you have one player left, Cole?
I do. And
okay. So Cole, I just want everybody to know Cole is about to get fired up. This is me like making him wait to talk about his guy. So here you go, Cole.
So if I ever come on for a show and I don't mention Chris Paul from Ole Miss ever, it's probably not me that's talking. This is a dude. So he's smaller. That's the first knock. He's smaller. He's not the greatest athlete. They just played the entire 17-game regular season with Nakobe Dean, who was a solid starter for him. But you get Chris Paul, who's probably a supersized Nakobe Dean with probably better instincts, if not on the same level of Zach Bonds. You get him in. When we did the interview, he was talking about pattern matching. That's one of his favorite types of things to do in coverage is pattern match. And what do the linebackers do when they're on their hook curls? They're pattern matching. So, it's just a seamless fit, especially with that rotating, like cover 3, cover 1 with that robber look. That was also what Chris Paul said his favorite coverage was. So you get him in like it's perfect for both parties here. And I'm not going to get too fired up because I could go on for Chris Paul for days, but that it just gets to a point where you can't leave. Like, I feel like I couldn't leave out probably one of the best fits on the entire list. And for pretty much any defense in the league, like Fangio's scheme there for Chris Paul is something that you can only dream of seeing because that's a 120 tackle dude.
Yeah.
Like Pro Bowl caliber type of linebacker if you get him in any of those schemes, whether that's Carolina, whether that's in Philly. Not sure Brandon Staley still has a job, but wherever you find, maybe Arizona, wherever those types of Fangio disciples or those Fangio tree branches are at, that's where he needs to go. But I'd love to see him in Philly.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's the thing. He has some of the best instincts in the class. That's one of the first things you look for with linebackers is the instincts. He can key and diagnose with the best of them. He may not have all the physical traits, but as we've seen in the NFL, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be the best athlete at the NFL level in order to be a good linebacker. But Pooh Paul, he's a guy. He's a 3-down linebacker. You can leave him in on 3rd down. He's going to have his instincts in coverage. You keep him clean, and he's just going to go make plays for you all day long.
Cool. And EJ, I believe is it 2 guys you haven't talked about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 2. Yeah, my 2 edge guys. The guys I got on the edge. First one is Quandarius Robinson. Now, see, he's a guy that he's probably going to go in probably day 3, more than likely. So, but the serious upside there. He's a guy that you can have. He's an athlete. He's got good size, and he moves well in space. He can play. He's a guy where, like Cole was talking about, he'll fit into the sim pressure scheme, where if you want him to be that rusher that's coming from the second level, he can do that because he does have some pass rush juice. He has speed, getting around the edge. He has signs of speed to power. I remember I watched him against, I forget who I watched him against, but he had a long arm, and he put the offensive tackle on his butt. Just put his hand in the middle of his chest, put the offensive tackle on his butt. So he has upside, and this is a guy, and with edge rushers in Fangio scheme, sometimes you have to drop in the shallow into the flats for coverage. So you need some guys that can move in space and be able to do that. He has the athleticism to do that. Same as with the other guy. I had Braden Swinson from LSU. He's a guy, you see him typically rushing from a 2-point stance. He has some hand usage. He's just a solid all-around defensive end. He has the athletic ability, I believe, to be able to drop into the flats on some snaps and cover a running back coming out in the flat. But he can rush from the 2-point stance. He has the strength to set the edge against the run. So these are 2 guys that they mirror the same skills. They're more upside guys. Well, I would say Quandarius Robinson is more of an upside guy. Braden Swinson, I would say, is more of a high floor guy. I don't know exactly how many, if he's going to be like a 12 sack guy or if he's going to be like an 8 sack guy, but he has a high floor. You can pretty much plug and play him as an outside rusher in Fangio's scheme.
So EJ, excuse me, I think the draft community is sleeping on both your edges.
Yeah, I don't know. Braden Swinson, I don't know why he's flying under the radar so much, but he's a good player. I mean, I started with him in summer scouting, and I've just been keeping up with him ever since. And this guy, he's a good player. He's a solid athlete. He has hand usage. He has get off. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where everybody, all the NFL isn't sleeping on him, but the media is. But he's a good player. I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the 2nd round.
So what's interesting about Swinson, right? So I get to listen to like 20 of you, right? Just with different draft professors. So there are people that have Swinson true 1st round grade top 20. And there are people that have Swinson, if you pick them in round 3, they say it's too early.
Too early.
Like the range of grades on him is probably like, I could understand a range of grades when we were doing this in December and January. But we're 4 weeks before the draft, and it's still that far apart on Swinson.
Yeah. And it's probably because, like, I don't know if he worked out at the combine, or I don't know if he put up any numbers or anything like that. But it's just that I guess some people he's not their cup of tea. But I think he's a good player. I like him. I take him on my team. If the Eagles drafted him at 32, I'll be like, I can see it. I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yep. So, Cole, where do you have Swinson on your board, just out of curiosity?
I love Swinson. Like EJ, I think I watched him in July, and I was like, this is a solid player. But I don't know too much about him yet, so I'm gonna watch him in the season. Watched him in the season. Watched him put a clinic against Ole Miss. Watched him put a clinic against UCLA, and I was like, okay, so I might have been on to something here. I bumped him like top 50, and then I watched him again before the Shrine Bowl when those rosters came out. I was like, okay, this is a guy I need to get kind of in that top 40, top 35 range. And he's kind of sitting in that 40, like 42 range right now. But he's somebody that, if you remember DJ Wanham last year before he went to Carolina, so I think 2023 when he was with Minnesota, that's somebody I kind of see Braden Swinson being, is a dude that you get on the simulator pressures, can play that outside line, like that true outside linebacker position, cause havoc. He's a dude that you're not really going to be able to kick out in the run game that much because you watch it against LSU, that kid gets in a car crash every single play. Specifically the Ole Miss game, there was like 5 plays in a row. It was just counter, and his poor body was just getting kick out block, but he just didn't move and would just overall kind of just spill it, which was impressive. And that's kind of what I expect him to be with that high floor, is a dude that you can have him playing the run game at the outside linebacker spot and be a 6 to 7 sack plus pass rusher. That's somebody that's worth taking in the back end of the first. And honestly, somebody I'd look for like a sneaky first round spot for him is Minnesota. But
my instinct would be Minnesota's going to go DB in round 1.
Me too, but I could see them getting a little bit weird because DJ Wanham was really good on that Flores scheme as well.
Okay, so there actually are a couple players. EJ, I don't think you've talked about Demetrius Knight yet, have you?
Oh, yeah, I missed him. Yeah, he's my other inside linebacker. Just like Carson Schlesinger, he has a little bit more bulk, a little bit more strength to his game, but he's still a downhill gap shooter. So that's why I like, and he's a guy you keep clean, and he can make plays on the back end. He'll meet a defender in the gap, and he won't get moved. He's a guy that offers a little bit more size. I envision him as like more of a Mike linebacker. He may not have the range that Schlesinger does, but he can get downhill, and he can attack on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So I like that's how I like him in that role.
Well, and then Cole, I believe you haven't done Izaraku or Josiah Stewart.
I did not. Kind of not going to like really get too much into detail because they are very similar players to what we talked about with Braden Swinson, especially Josiah Stewart. With Izaraku, it's kind of just you're getting a dude that can play that. What they expected out of Bryce Huff this year is kind of what I'd expect out of Izaraku, which is like in this draft, I'm cool with taking a designated pass rusher in the back end of the second round, like where the Eagles pick or in the third. Because the draft is, while deep, you're not really going to get that many quality starters. You're going to get rotational guys. And I just kind of question how well Donovan Izaraku can play the run. So with that said, he is a dude that you can drop back into those flats like Vic does love to do with his outside linebackers and edge rushers. So would I rather take Josiah Stewart maybe in round 3 over Izaraku in round 2? Sure, but they are both pretty easy fits to kind of plug and play there. Josiah Stewart probably would have more of a role though than what Donovan Izaraku would have.
Cool. So this is a pretty cool exercise, but before we wind it down, Cole, do you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find you?
Yep. You can find me on Twitter or X. Actually, the name on the bottom is wrong now. I changed it. It's all lowercase Coleplant with an underscore. I post pretty much rants or film reviews or big boards or mock drafts, whatever I'm kind of feeling. If I get fed up with people, I'll post a rant like I did with Shamar Stewart. But I'm working on my 2026 board right now, so I'm going to probably keep updating that within the next year. So.
EJ.
EJ Holt. You can find me on X or Twitter. Pretty much I'm doing film breakdowns. I'm doing position fits, pretty much stuff like this, where players fit and how they'll do in a specific scheme. I'll pretty much post what I like about players, what I don't like about players. Pretty much no hot takes, no clickbait or anything like that. Just honest film stuff. Boring, but yeah, that's pretty much, you can find my work there. And I'm working on a draft guide for Rogue Analytics that's coming out in the near future. So you can catch my draft evaluations there as well.
Fantastic. So for everybody watching, thank you for coming. I saw a couple draft professors in the chat, including Jake Robertson from Monday Nights. So Jake, thanks for stopping by. You can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. There we go, right there. Mm-hmm. No Iron Fanatic. It is the same on X and YouTube. The best thank you can give is please and thank you subscribe on YouTube. That's going to help the channel trend. We can tell people enjoy the content. We hope more people enjoy the content. And we will have another podcast. Actually, I think the podcast this evening after this is Bill Sparks is going to start laying out his 2026 player list for us. Mm. So that's going to be what's coming up tonight. But before we get out of here, EJ, if you look at Cole's list, how many players on Cole's list do you think go in round one?
All right. So, of course, the ones we had in common are Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, Carson Schlesinger. Well, Will Johnson and Walter Nolan, I think they're going to go in round one. Schlesinger probably round 2-ish, or maybe round 3. Who else did we have in common? Oh, Jalen Reed.
Any of the 11. So, like, where do you have Barron, Starks, Izaraku, Nolan?
Barron is a first rounder. Malachi Starks, I believe he's going to go in the first round. Hopefully, he goes 32. That'd be dope. Izaraku, I think Izaraku may sneak into the first round. I think he gets a lot of buzz. He's not really big, but he's got freakishly long arms and he's got some get off. I think he may be a guy that sneaks into the first round.
So Cole, when you look at EJ's list, how many players on EJ's list do you think go in round one?
Obviously Will Johnson. If you would have asked me about Maxwell Harrison probably 2 months ago before that one like random allegation came up, I'd probably say that as well. I'm not even sure what's going on with that, but that's just something I've kept in the back of my mind when I was kind of putting my final grade for him. And if you asked me in like June or July about Kevin Winston, I'd say that kid's going like top 15, but unfortunately he got injured. Other than that, I could see Braden Swinson maybe sneaking in there. Walter Nolan. Derek Harmon is one that I could totally see getting in to the back end of the first round, and somebody that I would feel comfortable taking if I was specifically the Eagles or they want to look at that defensive end 4i spot for him. Schlesinger could sneak in there, and I doubt Knight does, but you never know. Never know.
Okay. Cool. Well, we are going to close the podcast down, but for everybody watching, thank you. And we will see you on a podcast again in about 30 minutes. But have a good day, everybody.
Later.